Welcome to Neuronoodle's Neurofeedback and Neuropsychology Podcast, featuring tech legend Jay Gunkelman. He's the man who has read well over 500,000 brain scans, and Dr. Marie Swingle, author of iMinds. Our goal is to provide information and promote options for better mental health. The Neuronoodle Podcast is supported by listeners and businesses just like you. Hey, Gunkelman, we got you.
Good morning. Hey, when you're as old and feeble-minded as I am, you need all the help you can get.
You brought up feeble-minded, and Mitch McConnell comes to mind.
Is your head okay?
They're down, literally.
No, you know, polio. He had polio as a kid, and his bad leg gives out, and he goes down. And older he gets, he was an unfortunate one who caught polio. And it didn't iron lung him, but it took his leg. And anyway, he's 82. And I think an age limit of some sort is rational. Term limits have an issue. If you have short term for people in office, then staff become the ones who run things. And you have to allow the elected to run their office, not the staff. Again, an age limit, on the other hand, has got some rational basis to it. Don't trust anyone over 30. Don't you remember?
Don't we look at it like a driver's license? If you're a certain age,
hey, I don't have a driver's license. Look at this, that left turn, the rear view mirror on the side of the car that I can't see, the car next to me that I couldn't see. You can get a license with only one eye. Believe me, it's they put you through the ringer. And I got a cataract in this eye, so the resolution is fading, and I couldn't pass an eye test to drive. Luckily, but then I couldn't get out anymore anyway, so it doesn't matter. Yeah, it's not safe for be exposed to folks. Staying home is life extending. And I'm so crazy. I think of myself as good entertainment anyway.
Okay, there's something between your ears there with McConnell and Biden. Putting politics aside, whether Republican or Democrat, you have people that just clearly have been in the role too long, and these people are in power to influencing things that control our lives.
This goes back so damn far. Quentin Burdick, North Dakota Senator Burdick. In his heyday, well, he was the head of the Appropriations Committee and a very powerful senator. But he had strokes, and he couldn't speak. He couldn't write. He couldn't understand what you said to him. He was still in office. His staff was running his office, so constituents got their stuff taken care of and everything, as long as they could still defib him and keep him from being buried. He was still in office. And the 6-year senatorial cycle is a long one, and probably for a reason. It was thought more of as like the House of Lords, a cool-headed group by comparison to the short-term House of Representatives. Of course, right now the House of Representatives is they are elected to govern, which you've got to be able to pass appropriations, and the budget has to be passed through. The government comes to a halt if you don't have a budget that's approved. And
these people are voting. Should there be anything that we'd be concerned about?
At this point, the House of Representatives is so dysfunctional with such a slim margin that they can't get their act together to actually make something to vote on. And the Senate is saying they're going to step in front of them. Money, by the very nature of the law, is all monetary policies, all monetary bills and everything have to be initiated in the House. How can the Senate step in front of something that has to be initiated in the House? You know, that they can propose all they want, but they don't have the statutory power to initiate a spending bill. It's a crazy system. It's a crazy world. And it's got also checks and balances, which aren't necessarily active at the moment. Yeah.
So it's reality.
Yeah. It's government. I have a lowered expectation.
Okay. Last show, we talked about CEO searches, and you go out and then you're a recruiter and you go and try to find a CEO. You got to have somebody that can critically think, multitask, and whatnot. What would be the test that you would give them to check that box?
Make them juggle. The test that Trump claims to have passed with such flying colors is basically just a screener. If you can't pass that, you are demented. And to pass it doesn't mean a damn thing other than you didn't get caught as a demented individual. So,
Did Biden pass it?
I don't have to take it.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Should they? And what is it? What's this test, Jay?
If I had my druthers, their medical physical would include a quick screening. That there are neuropsych screenings that are very brief, and EEG and MRI, and not a CT because CT is radiation and it life dose and all that, but an MRI to get structure, which can end up identifying problems that aren't necessarily that they could be occult, not meaning like witches or bitches, but occult meaning hidden, which is the meaning of it really. And so hidden findings can be seen. As when they came out, they were finding all sorts of shit that they didn't expect. Little tiny meningiomas, little tiny pituitary adenomas that are too small to worry about. But when they saw them at first, they went diving in with neurosurgery to get them out. And after a while, they said, these things are so small, I don't think they would have been a problem for. What we should do is track them. Could come back every year and see if they're getting bigger, or track your hormones and see whether you're getting them impacted, because these little itty bitty tiny things were imageable, but they're significant yet. So anyway, looking would be reasonable. You'd know whether their brains had atrophied significantly, and the EEG can test networking and attentional skill sets and things such as that. It'd be a great thing to see as a part of their routine physical. If you pass your physical, you pass your physical. And the doctor can just tell people thumbs up, passed his physical, and that's all that would be needed. If the EEG came back with atrophy, you'd end up having to do some cognitive proof that you weren't demented.
With McConnell, we talked about the NFL. They put him up on that podium. I don't know why. It looks like he just fell. They put it was like a Bugs Bunny first aid lamp around the head. They
should have put one of these on him as well, or put some feathers out of the damn thing or something. But no, it wasn't a good costume. He's fallen down consistently, but he's consistently getting back up. And a lot of people didn't know that his leg was funky, and to a certain extent, he's going downstairs on a funky leg that's getting more funky, because as you age to that extent, your muscle mass are adding, and your balance is becoming iffy. And you see the people that say the test to see if you're going to live another decade is stand on one foot for a minute. It's not easy. It's not easy. There's a lot of balance you got to be doing, but you can see as people age that the ability to maintain accurate balance is less and less. And I tell you, when you have only one eye, you lose 3D, which is a lot of your vestibular sense. A touch of imbalance is built in at this point. Besides that, when they took my head apart to take the tumor out and put my face back on, after that, I had some vestibular issues. If I spin, I'm flat. To keep me off the dance floor. Michael Thompson would go out in his scooter. I think that's the only way I could have possibly gone out onto a dance floor, is sitting in something.
And then, Jay, we had a buddy.
Speaking of old times,
all right, go ahead.
I have to share a.
Make sure sharing is. There you go. There you go.
This day, 20 years ago, 2005, Michael Thompson, Linda Thompson, Herschel Tuhlman. I recognize him. I don't remember his name, but I recognize him from meetings. This was at Winterbrain in San Diego.
What is
in Palm Springs. Winterbrain started out as Key West EEG, Queeg, run by Rob Call, Kall. Rob invited, at the time, a fairly sequestered field and little camps. He invited all the camps to come together and party, basically, in Key West. And they would take over a little tiny hotel and the circumstance. But it outgrew Key West and then moved to Palm Springs. And this one in 2005, I believe, was already up in Palm Springs. And the Winterbrain cross-pollinated because the people that used one protocol camp would talk to people with the other protocol camp, and they cross-pollinated at Winterbrain. It was something that broke up some of the tribalism that was associated with there were Sturmanites and Lubarites and Othmarites. So it's almost like religious groups, but they cross-pollinated. They hung out in the hot tub together, and it was a very social, non-aggressive common chirp. And everybody called truce and met at Winterbrain. And it was an interesting thing, but it's a lot of work to put on a meeting. You have hotel contracts and food contracts. It's difficult. And if you're doing it as a charitable donation, you don't really worry about making money. But Rob Call was trying to actually run it as his venture. And he was selling tapes of the videotapes and audio tapes and all of that. He was doing well with all of that. But the meetings moved to Florida again, in Miami, but on the wrong end of the beach and the hotels. And the meetings became lesser and finally petered out. And anyway, in 2005 in Palm Springs, they were still rolling.
What is it today?
It stopped. Winterbrain stopped. Now, some people have said that Suisun City's little Suisun Summit meeting has the feel of the Winterbrain because it's all, amicable. There's no shooting across the room at each other. Everybody gets together in the bar and it goes out to dinner together, and it's a relatively sociable event. So there's been some comparisons in that respect, but I wouldn't take anything away from Rob Call's running of his meetings. And at this point, I think he's at least my age, maybe a little older. I see he's doing lapidary rock art on Facebook. I see he's gluing together little trays with colored rocks on it and stuff. Anyway, lives in Philadelphia, a couple blocks away from where that plane crashed.
Oh yeah. So Jay,
he had a video of that plane crash with some guy walking out of the fireball on fire, his back and arms up. He was on fire, walking out of the fireball. I don't know what happened to him. I haven't tracked it or heard it, but it was an eerie. It's hard to get that image out of your head when you see that.
So 2005, what were they? I want to say arguing about, but what they had
right over here.
Yeah.
On Herschel's wall, there's a chart showing how fast people's TOVA, I think it was a TOVA, actually improved. And the rate of improvement in basically. And that they showed that HEG got a quicker improvement. And then they also showed on the same graph kind of master therapists like the Thompsons and others, and showed that the skill set of the therapist had an effect on how fast the recoveries happened as well. Anyway, but Herschel was a data guy. He graphed it. He didn't argue it. He was a doctor of science. He actually, to the day he died, had money coming in from Bell Telephone. He designed a noise suppression system using a driven shield, shielding a wire and inserting a signal into the shield in order to cancel. So anyway, that he made that he had the patent on it, and they paid him a royalty. But he invented radio control flight. Everybody that's got the little planes and stuff like all that, flip back through the history of it, you'll see Herschel, same guy, care. A friend of his damn near died doing testing an experimental plane, and they decided that they needed to do something where it was radio controlled model instead of anyway, he invented this controller.
I wonder if he's going to work with Elon and Neuralink.
Herschel was really quite the character, and into his 90s, I remember Brian Milstead running across the room, yelling, "No, Herschel, no." Herschel's climbing up on a ladder to hook the lights on the top of his display. And he's 95 years old. He's up there trying to get the lights hooked on so that they would show down onto the data. Anyway, he was sure that was going to be the end of him. Herschel didn't have a bad leg, so he wasn't one that was falling.
So you pointed to the graph on the wall. What was there an aha moment and said, "Oh yeah, you guys are right," or "Yes, we."
It was just a way for people to understand that there's another tool, and HEG works in the front if you want to activate the front, but there are some people that you don't want to activate, and there are some people that just got a problem in the front, and it doesn't work very well through the hair, assuming you have it. I can get back to C3 and C4 about now, but Herschel had the wisdom to see that this was a technique that could be used to look at the redness of the blood, oxygen perfusion, basically, in the area. And the light actually goes through the skin and skull, and the redness of the brain itself is reflected. And that basically is picked up as an infrared on a bounce back. It's a clever way of seeing brain function. Richard Catton in 18th British Medical Journal #2 showed that when you turn an area of the brain on functionally, it gets red, but you can tell it's turned on functionally because it goes electronegative before it turns red. So the blood flow happens after the electrical activation of the area. Anyway, the Catton's work in 1875 was with respect to slow cortical potential, DC field potentials within the brain. And he wasn't specifically looking at the EEG waveforms. That didn't happen until later, but there were enough people working in it that the Nazi Burger wouldn't have been the only one finding it.
When did photobiomodulation come into play?
I'm not an expert on that. I've seen it around for quite a long time with various devices. The one where you clip one piece on your nose and it does 10 and gamma. Yeah, that's been around a long time, but it's become more and more popularized, and the ability to control what frequencies are being, what frequencies it's stimulating at, or is it just static? All of that has become a lot more advanced. Obviously now you'll find all 19 electrode sites with independently controllable photobiomodulation.
Jay, we had a viewer question from Sweden. Did you happen to see that? Here, I'll read.
Let me go back to.
This is Johan. Hi, Pete. I'm one of your listeners, so I'm happy the show exists, especially talks to Seabird and Mary Swingle. Oh, no, Jay. All right, we won't answer his question then. But got both of their books, trying to get through them. I'm a lay trainer, so nothing fancy, but the subject of training my brain I really take seriously. Besides that, I'd like to point out to a very interesting case you might have seen or heard about, which I would like to hear you guys talk about on an episode. I saw the EEG of a woman drawing with all four limbs at the same time.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear your thoughts. How do you do that?
There are people that have unique skills. I don't know if you've ever seen the car detailers that paint fancy pinstriping. They'll come big swirls in one direction and do a big swirl with the exact opposite mirror image without any, that's all freehand. There are people that are artistic that have fabulous control like that. There are people that use both hands. Apparently this person uses both hands and both feet, and it takes a lot of practice. This isn't something you're born with necessarily you don't come out with picture perfect art off both hands or both feet. But the EEG recording and processing, unfortunately, was not performed in a way that I think would be able to show things accurately. Nunez has warned against linked ears since 1997, and all of the analysis was using linked ears. Maybe 20% of the time, it gives you accurate enough data if you use linked ears. It should have been in the best level of science that's available for neuroscience. And there's a nice paper out of Neuroinfo called Dangerous Phase. It's written by, goodness, I'm blocking his name, but it's out of Nunez's lab. And they talk about the impact of the reference point on measurement of the EEG and also on coherence. And they basically point out that current source density, which is a specific kind of a Laplacian technique, it's with the distance from the electrode that you're interested in is taken into account, or a global average, which the distance is not taken into account. Those two techniques are the best way to see the EEG spectra and also coherence. Now, that conflicts with the vendor who tells you that Laplacian techniques ruin coherence, and he won't let you see coherence with his software using that approach. But, at one vendor in a little field, the rest of neuroscience is a big world and isn't like that. Anyway.
In our Q&A last night, Jay, Dr. Andrew Hill and I were having a little chat, which is just scary because it's just he and I in the room. And one of the questions was brought up.
Andrew's not that scary. You're perfectly safe. You're perfectly safe. Deep breath. You'll take a little heart rate variability. You'll feel fine in the same room. So
I'm learning enough about computer programming to be dangerous, but I'm definitely ahead of my skis. There's a new little computer that's been out for a while that makes computing affordable, the Raspberry Pi. You can buy it for under $100. It's a little computer. I'll put a little picture of it right here. As these computers become more affordable and easier to use and operate, you built amplifiers back in the day. What would it take to take a little computer and figure out how to get one lead in to pick up a signal on the brain and at least pick up some brain chemicals in one spot? Or is it just too hard to get rid of the artifacts right now? Any thoughts?
If the little computer is plugged into the wall, then you start to have electrical safety issues with respect to being tapped into it.
Battery option?
Battery option ends up taking care of that as a concern. However, it's not inconsequential, because if the person doesn't understand that it just takes one little error with 60 hertz passing between your temporal lobes for you to notice the difference. Convulsive therapy at home. So
I'm just saying sensors. Is it possible to have a little?
It's entirely possible. And flip back to the 70s, and Tom Kalura had a very nice little kit, a bunch of parts and a little board, and you could build your own amp. And they had Pong style software that they had written, and the user group wrote little pieces of software that would be little game like things. And so that there were people doing it early on. Now it had, they were a little gamey thing, and it was a kit that wasn't a high end deal. It was only an 8-bit resolution, which is not really adequate for EEG. Anything below 14-bit, you can't get a good enough resolution for the variability of voltages. But now 32, 64, but there's no concern over it now. Yeah, back then you could get the little kits that would build EEG amps. It's not much different now. The quality of the chips that go into it are a lot better. When we built our pocket size amp, it had two boards all jammed together into a pocket size deal, but it was built with op amps, and now you get an instrumentation amp on a single chip. So you could build an instrumentation, high quality instrumentation front end, and that would have to end up being as a chip adapted to a board that would have an input. And obviously you have to pick your op amp appropriately. There's all sorts of different kinds of levels of amplification. So you don't just blindly talk to people that are working in the field and get pointed at appropriate amp chips.
I'm just wondering, you have this little computer, you have this one sensor. Can you take that one spot and go around and piecemeal together? And
Easy is never done with one sensor. You have three.
Okay. But one that's picking up.
You have two that are picking up something that you're trying to measure. The difference between two spots. You can do it sequentially or make one an assumed reference point, which you assume is neutral, but it never is. So you have to be very careful of the reference. And that's the paper dangerous phase. Your reference can you over really easily. So those two go on, but you also have a ground electrode. The ground electrode has to be on for your 60 hertz to be rejected. A common mode rejection requires a ground, and that's the appropriate three electrodes that you end up having to put on. And the two active electrodes that they say grid 1 and grid 2, those are tube amplifier terms. So it goes back to tube amps. That's when I cut my teeth on tube amps. Grass Model 1, Grass Model 3, the old 1,500 watts of power to power them up. You could heat a room with them, and we did. You have to make sure that the room has enough circulation to tolerate the heat. It's 1,500 watt. That's one of those heating towers that you would have in your house.
Cooking a chicken on that.
Oh yeah, you damn well could. Gigantic glowing power tube amps and a car battery to power the preamps. Quite the early machines. But anyway, regardless of the bad old days with needle electrodes and tube amps.
I'm just throwing it out there for somebody that this is going to piss off a lot of people that are making their own equipment and stuff, but you have the mom that is tech savvy, that doesn't have a lot of money, that is trying to get
for about 2,000 hours of your time, you could save spending a few $100 for an amp.
Yeah.
But you'd have learned something in the 2,000 hours of your time, $2,000 worth of your time. If you pay yourself a reasonable rate, it's going to take you time to design and build an amplifier. And the amplifier has to be sensitive to millionths of a volt. So it's not just amplifying something that's already milliamp level, that you preamps bump it up to a milliamp level, and then that can be processed. So
is insulation the issue? I'm going to put on my headlamp later and get my little tweezers to try to put this thing together. But is the sensor that you have going in, that signal that goes in, making sure that's not corrupted in any way, is that the big issue?
The sensor going to the amplifier acts as an antenna, and it can pick up 60 hertz if there's an imbalance between the two impedances. So if they're exactly balanced, then you don't pick up as much 60 hertz. But if there's a little bit of an imbalance, you pick up more 60 hertz, and it has to be rejected through the ground. So you want to minimize your distance from the 60 hertz source, first of all, to minimize that. And in your amp design, you're going to have to design not just the fact that it's amplified, but what is amplified? What frequency range? Are you interested in DC? That makes it a more expensive, more difficult task. But if you're not interested in anything below 2 hertz, it's a lot cheaper. The DC stability of the amp chip can be a little funky. But what's your high frequency? Do you want to stop at 35 or 30 like some databases? And not worry about the 60, just chop everything from 30 on up off?
What should I do, Jay? Tell me. I'm taking notes.
What do you want to do with it? Is this a toy you're trying to play with your brain, or are you thinking you're going to build the amp that's going to train your brain to not have a medical condition? I mean,
just to get raw data.
You can get raw data, and if your purpose is just to see something, you can do it fairly cheaply. If you want to go DC to 150 hertz with a nice flat frequency response with no ripple within the bandpass, it's a bit more complicated design. There's a reason that EEG amplifiers historically were more expensive because they were much more difficult to design historically. Now their cost has come way down because, again, what we had to build with instrumentation amp chips are now on an instrumentation amp. The whole thing is on a chip. You can have one chip and a multiplexer, which it gives you a little bit of less than perfect signal processing. When you multiplex signals through a single amp, you can have 19 channels, but you only have one amp chip. If you try to remontage, there's a certain amount of skew because you're not simultaneously sampling all channels. Anyway, there's a lot of options out there, and you need to come up with what your purpose is before you come up with what your design is.
I think the first thing I'm going to do is keep putting it together, and I just want to pick up something. And let's just say CZ, I got something happening at CZ. I got something on my ear. I got a third one in there. Can I get a decent signal off of that?
You can. If you build a decent preamp and amp setup, you can get a good signal. The electrode contact, if you're trying for dry sensor, becomes a more complicated design.
You heard it here first, folks, or I'll just edit this out in case I screw it up, Jay. That's the beautiful thing about having a podcast. But it comes down to whatever noise that you have in that signal or signal in the noise. A Gunkelmentary that's out there, Jay. We've had a bunch of users ask about that. Do you want to talk about that? Maybe there'll be another showing sometime.
If we want to end up doing a 2-hour-long showing of it at some point, it would be okay with me. We'd have to get permission from the owners. Mary Tracy and Ethan Ireland own the rights to the video documentary.
Let me talk to your agent because you should get a little taste of that, Jay. Mary Tracy, by the way, happy birthday.
Oh yeah, that snuck past yesterday. I saw somebody give her a happy birthday thing, and I think, why don't I have that on my calendar? You know,
it's today.
There was no notification. I don't get any notification on it. That's all. I'll have to punch it in after I chat with her. So
Jay, you don't need any notifications. All right, Jay, we'll cut it short. You want to do a quick pan over to Sky or see out with Renita somewhere?
I think he's actually, Renita bought him like a sheepskin, fluffy. He's got a spot on the floor over next to the TV room out in the front, and he sits out there and listens for stuff out in the front door, the guard in the front. So besides, I've got the back door open and it's colder back here. I'm from Fargo. I like the cool temperatures, and
you got the west winds now.
The rest of the people in the house like it nice and warm. Island girl Renita has a fireplace going in her room in the front TV room. And anyway, I sit back here and with the door open.
Beautiful. It's come up. That's Wednesday, 6 p.m. Central Time, 4 p.m. Pacific.
It's always lively chatter. There's always good things to talk about. So.
As long as we keep it away from politics, we'll leave that for Facebook. All right, Jay.
Have a good day.
Bye-bye.
The Neuronoodle Podcast is supported by listeners and businesses just like you.